Good evening, and I don't know actually when you're going to be watching this, but welcome to ED626 Conclusions. We are coming to the end of our research project. You guys have worked very hard, come up with some amazing data, and I'm going to start off with talking about a little bit about your essential question responses. How did you explain your data, and what did you learn from your data? Then a short discussion on conclusions, which we've actually talked about the last session, but I have a little bit of information for you. And of course, formatting as always. So with that, let me move forward to the quotes of the week. One of the very clear things that everybody came up with is that your data didn't have like clear, exact, final, up and down conclusions, findings, results. Not unexpected in human research. And a couple of you responded to others very, very positively, I thought very constructively. And so I included a few of these responses because this is really, our job in our profession is navigating these human factors in our classrooms. And even though results may have been disappointing to you, you still made changes in what you do as a practitioner. And you still help students gather and garner strategies to help themselves make changes as a learner. So Catherine responded, and it sort of encapsulates what many of you have experienced. My students' lack of retaining information has been perplexing to me for some time. I do believe it is tied in part to whether or not their basic needs are being met. And you think of Maslow's hierarchy. How can they begin to even focus if they are hungry, tired, etc.? When I discuss assessments with parents, I often tell them it's a snapshot of what was happening at the moment on that day. Several factors could have influenced the outcome. Even though you're disheartened with some of the data, it sounds like these students did have growth, even if it wasn't as expected. I still see it as positive. Maybe there would have been less or none if the intervention hadn't happened at all. You did make a difference, and I think I could send that message to every single one of you. Christina mentioned the more data we have on how outside factors affect what happens with students inside school, the better conversations with parents we can have about what we are seeing with their children. I've been able to present data to parents about sleeping, and it has made a difference. Hopefully, the more informed we and others are, the more of a difference we can make. And I think Christina brings up a very important point about your data and about you as researcher, as teacher. And that is that you need to find out about your students. And when you do, and you have conversations, for example, on this with parents, you can affect students' behavior that way, the external factors that you don't have control over in your classroom. So because you're setting up a collaborative relationship with the parents. Amy mentioned that she was amazed at how many hidden threads seem to be running through the data. I guess that's why it's qualitative and we can just make observations and suggested relationships between the data. I liked how she phrased that. And it's true, many of you have discovered things that you wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't done this research. And a few of you commented how much you started observing more about about your students and about what they're learning and about how they're learning. And that's one of the great benefits and side effects of doing classroom research. Erica mentioned in discussions with my students who especially struggled with the worksheets, they said they had trouble recalling the information from past chapters to complete the worksheets. I don't know if it is they cannot remember the information at all or if they cannot remember what happened in the particular chapter. I'd like to ask one of my students before I wrap this thing up, and I think that's the key piece. Talk to the students. Ask them, because a lot of you had to readjust your interviews because the questions didn't quite get what you wanted to get at. And so this kind of conversation that even Erica has at the end before she closes up the research is something you can include in the conclusions and conversations. I had a conversation with the student and this is what I found out, and as a result, these are maybe the next steps I will take. Organizing data and locating themes is key. Those themes are like anchors that prevent you from floating aimlessly through data analysis, and that is probably an analogy that I will use in the future. And a lot of you had discovered this, but the themes really are your organizing principle. And that's why at the beginning with your literature search, you set up those themes as investigative areas. And I've seen, I think to one of you, this has been very helpful to you. And I just really liked Catherine's example, her metaphor. So Moving to conclusions, next steps. This is the last section in your research paper other than your references and in your appendices. In this section, you're going to talk about how the results of your study are important to you and how they might be helpful to others. What revelations did the data provide relative to your research questions and beyond? That should be a question mark there. In this section, you should also talk about with whom it is important to share your results. And as somebody mentioned earlier in the quotes, parents are often a good consumer of your research as well, not just the students. So you've got your students, you've got your parents, you've got your principal, you've got other teachers, and you may think of some other body of persons that might be interested. I think Stephanie's is sharing it with other teachers that are interested in body science, for example. The most important part of this section is your description of and justification for how you plan to use your data to solve your problem or improve your practice, or even continue with the study. What new questions did you come up with? These are exciting. These are more questions. These are what you're going to keep your eyes on after you leave this class. What are your next steps? After this section, you create a page break and present all your references, every single one of them. And I think most of you have done that when you added some things in your data analysis because you needed to add some more theoretical foundations. You just added those to the reference page. So make sure that if you have two different reference pages, you combine them. Make sure they're all there together. They're alphabetical order. They're hanging indentation. They're double spaced between. Please cross-check your document to make sure they're all included. If you have appendices, they follow the references, each on their own page, and they need to have the correct APA heading. So this is really all about conclusions that I have to say. The rest of this is going to be a quick review of APA, remembering the tenses that in your conclusions, you're also going to be writing in present tense. And you can be reflective and say, and I thought about, in past tense. You can like past perfect, right? So you can draw on the past. Just make it grammatically correct. Stick in the present tense, unless it's something that you're reflecting on in the past. This is something that I found this slide here, and I thought, why didn't I have it much earlier? But anyway, it's okay because you have the APA formatting section, and you've all been following it very, very well. You've all been pretty much keeping track. All sentences are followed by 2 spaces before the start of the next sentence, no spaces between paragraphs, no extra spaces between paragraphs. Headings, whether centered or not, have only the first word in the heading capitalized. Commas in a series are used, the comma before and. These are just common mistakes people make. Your final paper, if you look at the cheat sheet I have, just follow the cheat sheet for for the sequence of organizing your paper. After you finish the conclusions, you're going to be developing your abstract and introduction for the research paper itself. And then all of the rest you have: literature review, method, results, conclusions, references, and appendices. So after the conclusions, which are due next week, I'll get to the dates because I always mess that up. You'll be finishing the top part of your paper and finalizing it with your friends, making your infographic, and I've got our unconference set up, my organization for that. So your guiding questions for the conclusions with your critical friends, because you're going to submit it before you submit it as an assignment. How are the results of your study important to you, and how might they be helpful to others? What's the big picture? What revelations did the data provide for you relative to your research questions and beyond? So the revelations is really quite interesting. I think that's one of the more interesting parts of the conclusion. Who would you like to share your findings with and why? How has the study improved or affected your practice? And what new questions did you come up with? As I mentioned earlier, that's always very interesting too. What are your next steps with regard to this research, and is your section correctly formatted? So next steps, you have an essential question due this Friday. How have my data supported the existing research? What needs to be considered now? What will I do next with this information? So it's leading into, of course, your conclusions, which will be due by Wednesday. So submit Wednesday next, so 11/23. I don't know when you're going to be watching this because I'm going to submit it today, and today's Tuesday. Submit your conclusion sections to your critical friends for review prior to submission. Post your conclusions by Wednesday, 11/23. That's Thanksgiving week. No response due. No essential question reflection due. Thanksgiving break, 11/24 through 27. So enjoy whatever you are grateful for. Plan. This is sort of the end of the class planning. Title page, abstract, and introduction due 11:30, along with a final reading response. There's one left. Develop your infographic on the project posted to Padlet. I have here another venue, but I'm going to use Padlet. I have a plan. Required class meeting on 12/8 to share infographics. This will be our unconference for the end of this class. This will be our performance task, our culminating performance task. And your final research papers and wrap-up reflection are due 12/12. That's the week of finals. So you'll have time if you need to go back. If you have any questions that somebody may have asked you during the infographic presentations, you can go back and kind of touch that up before you submit it for your final assignment. No feedback. I will not provide you feedback on the final research papers. I've given you tons of feedback prior to that. So whatever you submit to me is what you submit to me. I will accept it as your final product, and thank you very much for your hard work, and pat yourself on the back for a job well done. You guys have done a fabulous job. Always fascinating to see your research. So have confidence that everything has worked out just as it should, even if you think the data isn't exactly what you wanted or hoped. I think that some of the side effects of this, and if we had had our class, we would have talked about it, some of the side effects of this research really is almost more important than the research itself. Not to say your research isn't important. So with that, I will talk to you in 2 weeks, because Thanksgiving week we are not going to have class, and I will see you then the week after Thanksgiving online for a conversation before we do our unconference. And our unconference, I didn't write it on the meeting, but our unconference is going to be on the 8th of December, just so you know. Have a good week. Have a good 2 weeks, and I'll talk to you soon. I'll certainly send you an update next week.